I'm Dawn Montefusco, Transformational Writing Coach, and this is the healing power of words. Create with passion and write powerful stories that have impact. Today we have a really special guest because I've only talked to him on the phone, and today I get to actually see him. And his name is William Marsh. He's a guitarist, vocalist, and music mindset coach based in Los Angeles. Before the pandemic, he toured internationally with Pink Martini, Edna Vasquez, and Cardioid. In the past, he has toured with Cherry Poppin' Daddies, Haley Lauren, Lost Lander, and many other artists. Prior to his move to California from Portland, Oregon, he taught guitar at Reed College and Willamette University. He currently coaches musicians of all levels, supporting them in creating a life in music that is meaningful to them. I can't believe we're here. Hi, William. I usually call him Bill, so hi, William.
Hi, Don. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, it is my pleasure. And side note, everyone, it is because of William, I have a Taylor GS Mini guitar now, and I'm back to strumming and playing guitar as one of my loves on the side. So don't ask me to play you a song, but I just want to say thank you to him publicly because it's such a healing work that he does with people. But let's start out. Just tell us any projects you're working on, or what are you doing these days?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm more or less sheltering in place here in Highland Park, Los Angeles. I've been working on I guess project right now is I've been working on a string arrangement for one of the tracks that with Cardioid, one of the bands I play with.
Mhm.
Since we're not touring or anything, we're just kind of like working on stuff. And I thought, this song could use some strings. And so my partner Kaylee Drain is also a music mindset coach, but she's a cellist. And so I was like, okay, well, she'll play the cello part, and then we'll find a violinist and a viola player. And so been doing it kind of socially
Fun.
distanced, and that's been pretty fun. Other than that, just journaling a lot, practicing, talking to a bunch of wonderful musicians, and just kind of living in this world of music mindset, especially in a time when things are weird.
Yeah, I wish that was my next lead, and you already got me there. I was going to say we live in some strange times right now. I mean, there's like everything is so uncertain, and I think the biggest virus we're dealing with is fear because that's what you know everyone wants to capitalize on the fear the most. But right now, I think is an extraordinary time to really recognize that words have power. And one of the things that you do, and words can heal. One of the things that you do that is really remarkable is you work on language internally and how it accesses our reality. So you're a music mindset coach. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you help people with the words that they use in their minds?
Yeah. So, well, I think of language as our access as human beings to reality.
Mm,
Um, Things exist in our world. For example, let's say we're looking out at a landscape. There's a hillside. There's a tree. But hillside, tree, those words are what distinguishes those particular items from the rest of the environment. So in other words, like we call it a hillside, and we know that this is the hillside, and everything else is not the hillside. But
right.
without that word, it would just be this, right?
Yeah,
Whatever that is. I mean, it would still be there, of course, and I think that, I mean, you could call it a hillside, you could call it a hillock. I mean, I don't know all the words. You're a writer. You probably know all the words for hill, but there are so many different ways we can describe it. And I think, like, for example, in this situation right now, I've heard people call it a pandemic. I've heard people call it an apocalypse, which I think is,
right.
it's like, I mean, I can completely understand the space from which somebody would be coming and seeing the world that you knew, more or less disappear, or at least transform in such a way that it's
Mhm.
unrecognizable. And that can feel apocalyptic, but I think there's a real power in really calling it what it is, and saying that, well, we can't go outside for the foreseeable future, or we can go outside. I'm sorry. We can't be with people in an enclosed space, for example. Well, we
Mhm.
know that, like for example, the way the virus is transmitted, and we know that there are measures that we can take to
Mhm.
to mitigate that spread, and that's just what it is. And the
Mhm.
words that we wrap around it, whether it's apocalypse or
Or
all
conspiracy. I
or
mean, it's
conspiracy, or yes, of course. I mean, yeah, there's that whole world too, and there's all these words that people use to talk about it, and I think it's a lot of it is just story. Like we have to create a
Mm,
story for
right.
ourselves in order to wrap our heads around what's actually happening. And of course, it's much easier to just create a story than than every single time to say exactly what is going on in great
Mhm.
detail, and then eventually that story kind of usurps whatever's actually going on in our minds, and we go, this is easier to think about, and so then that ends up being the reality that we have, even though that's
Mhm.
just kind of it's one perspective on it, it's one
Mhm.
story around it. It's not necessarily what's so.
I love that you used the word story right there. It was funny because when I was jumping on just a few minutes ago, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so perfect because it says create with passion and write powerful stories that have impact. And with you, it's what story are you creating within you that can make an impact for, and we'll use music as an example because you know uh, as writers, our instruments are either our keyboard or our pens. It's just another instrument, and so you really, what I love is you use certain terms like what's showing up around that, and you'll leave it an open book to understand what I think is, I'm getting this right. What story is your client writing in order to that might be getting in their way of music, right? So people come to you because they want to either start playing music, continue playing music, be more consistent with playing music. Um, and I love this idea of a music mindset. So, what stories have you helped clients rewrite, let's say, to in order to uh, have more consistency in their world?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'll share some of my own experience first of all,
Yeah.
because I think that's what I'm most intimately
Yeah, perfect.
familiar with. There, I grew up playing music. I started when I was around 12. I was playing guitar and trumpet. Eventually, I went on into college to study music, and I was pretty good pretty good, right, in my community. Up until then, I got to college, and all of a sudden, I'm like, holy cow! There's so many people here that are so good. And one of the things that really I've recognized through the work that I do is that unworthiness is a
Mm,
big story for me. Is that
mm.
I'm not worthy, and if I
Yeah,
can be perfect, then I will be worthy, right?
right.
So like if I could only be this, so if I could only play correctly. So I got a degree in jazz studies, which is
Mm,
heavily improvisational. And in that track, I was always trying to play jazz correctly, as
wow.
somebody, growing up in the, you know, 90s and early 2000s,
Mhm.
never been to New York City. How are you supposed to play jazz correctly, right? I mean, and it's like, and so I was so bent on doing it right that that thought consumed me to the point where I couldn't do it without feeling anxious, without anxiety. I was a
Yeah.
total choke artist. And when I became present to the fact that, you know what, nobody really knows what they're doing. This is all an experiment, and what I have to say is valid, just as and that's and me recognizing that it's valid is what validates it, right? And approaching music from this new paradigm, rather than trying to um, be somebody else or be something, being myself, being authentic in my self-expression, through music as my medium. It made available to me, just a whole completely different paradigm of living. It felt like, I mean, this
Mm,
translated in so many different parts of my life. um, that's I don't know. That's kind of my story with this work.
No, I love
But
that you went the key word that you said that I thought is so funny because I hear it on so many levels, like on so many levels that I'm like it hit me just now when you said no one really knows what they're doing. Like it's so amazing because I've heard that from, I mean, truly, like Jack White. I had the pleasure of actually meeting him when he was touring here because he's a dear friend of mine is doing keyboard for him now. And, normally you would think like all my friends were freaking out about it. And I had listened to his lyrics, I listened to his new stuff, and I really wanted to comment that I was impressed with his evolution. And so I asked him, I said, hey, can I talk to you for a second after the show? And he's like, what? And I was like, I just want to say, I really love how you've evolved in your lyrics and you seem to really want to pull the audience in to your story to make it bigger. He looks at me and he literally says, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. He's like, I'm just doing the best that I can do. And I just want everyone to know there's no difference in me and
Mhm.
and it was so like, whoa, again, like I hear that. So I think that's a great thing for everyone to hear you say is that because when you said not worthy, I felt that through my body too. Like, oh my gosh, I felt that way too. When are we going to learn that there's no perfection, right? You just keep going. How did you, but you've done some really cool shit. So how did you get to the point where you felt worthy, obviously worthy enough to tour with some of the best?
Oh wow. Well, um, it's funny though that unworthiness that keeps showing up. It shows
Mm,
up all the time. I mean, it showed up for me to a degree in doing this interview with you. Even I mean, this is it's a part of the context in which
yeah.
life shows up for me, and I feel like every day I get better at recognizing when it's showing up and going, that is not me.
Yeah.
That was those two little boys in the park when I was 5 that teased me, or whatever. It's
Mhm.
like that was not me, right? And it's amazing. Um, I'm sorry, I lost the thread. What was your question? Was, oh, how did I get to the point where I started touring and
Yeah, where
I
you let
mean,
go of the perfectionism, where you actually did just go for it.
yeah, I think at a certain point I knew what I was committed to.
Mhm.
Um, I was committed to really being self-expressed on my instrument, which is the guitar. I'm a guitarist, first and foremost, I would say, and so I spent a lot of time practicing the instrument, and I also spent a lot of time creating relationships with people,
Mm.
with everybody. Musicians that were much better than me, of course.
Yeah,
Like I would love, better than me. I would love to be involved with them, but also everybody that's around me. Students or people that I think were kind of coming up. Even though such as I was, I was still coming up
totally.
too, and in doing that, I'll tell you, all of the breaks that I got, first with Cherry Pop and Daddies, I got that because I was playing in some other bands with some of the band members, and when the guitar spot opened up, they recommended me to Steve Perry, the band leader, and I auditioned and I got the gig, and I toured with them and recorded with them for about 4 years, and then up in Portland, a dear friend of mine who I collaborated with a lot, he met Thomas Lauderdale randomly one day, and Thomas asked him if he had a recommendation for a guitarist that could do the jazz thing and the pop thing and the world music thing, and he knew I was playing with Edna Vasquez, and so he recommended me, and then I was at Lowe's on a Saturday
I
in
love it.
August of 2017 picking out a paint color for the ceiling of our bonus room, and my phone rings, and I usually don't answer the phone on Saturdays if it's like up, or weekends if it's a
Totally.
number I don't know, and I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and pick it up, and surely it was Thomas, and he said, do you have a passport, and do you want to come play this party in Bucharest, Romania in 2 weeks? And I said, okay, I'll be there. But I think the big part of this is like, it's not that, um I was already working on being the person that gets that
Mm.
call,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
I think that's the biggest thing is like I'm practicing daily. I'm cultivating relationships and showing up for people even when they don't I can't get anything from them,
Mm,
like to show up and to be a team member and to be somebody who people want to be working with
right.
because you're generous with yourself,
Mhm.
being generous of yourself, and and people, I think I think that's the kind of person that someone wants on a team. I mean, think about if you're
Mhm.
creating a team, what kind of person do you want on that team?
Mhm.
Can you be that person?
Right.
And like, and be someone who shows up, is punctual, is good at what they do, or at least is has a authentic self-expression, and
Totally, totally. No, I love what
yeah,
you're saying, especially, um, couple things. One, Les Brown said it for I'm sure it's been said before, but I first heard Les Brown say it, oh my gosh, maybe 20 years ago, and he says, "It's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than it is to have an opportunity and not be prepared." And I remember hearing that, not quite understanding it 20 years ago. And then slowly it's become more and more obvious to me. Oh, I see. And part of that preparedness is being true to yourself, which is what you mentioned, and
yeah,
how when you show up for you, the world will conspire in your favor.
yes,
And uh, so you were prepared for an opportunity that showed up. And one of the things that I want to get across in this interview to some of my writers out there, and songwriters as well as poets and all kinds of genres, is one of the things that comes up time and time again is the importance of writing at the same time each day, or at least somewhat consistent either in environment or in time, and treating it kind of like a professional, like a job, right? Stephen Pressfield talks about that in his book, War of Art and Turning Pro. What is important? Like, what would you get? Because I know you know. I'm just asking you so you can tell the audience. What's important about showing up for yourself and practicing your instrument every day? And I've had many writers say their instrument is their journal, like where they're writing by hand, or their keyboard. So what's important? What happens in the mind, in the body, in the spirit when you show up every day for yourself and you play your instrument, or for the writers out there, you're writing every day?
yeah. I think of it to to be a musician. It's it's a way of being. Of course, when
Mm,
you think of musician, we think of someone that has skills X, Y, and Z. They're able to play an instrument and they're able to do this, that, and the other. But all of that shows up inside of a way of being. It shows up
mm,
inside of um, being. I mean, being human. First of all, music is a human phenomenon. As
mhm,
writing is. Um, but um, I when I started practicing being the way that I wanted to be, and then practicing the skills inside of that, I wanted to, that's when I started feeling really inside of, I started feeling like I was inside myself. I was really like,
mm.
I was, I was being me, I was being authentic maybe.
Yes.
So for example, you know, one of the core principles in the work that I do with clients is relating powerfully to your word. So and like I talked about before, I see word as your access to reality. So it really
Mm.
starts with creating a whole ideal reality for yourself with your word, and then
Wow.
taking that, creating actions that are going to have you experiencing that, right? Because your actions will dictate an outcome. You can kind of work backwards. You can reverse engineer it. It's like, okay, so I want an omelet. So what am I going to do to have an omelet? Well, I crack a few eggs, probably about 3-ish eggs into a bowl, whisk them up. There's particular actions that are
Yes.
aligned with having an omelet, right?
Yes.
Um, but you can create your entire future using your word. You can say, this is what I want, and based on that, these are the actions that I will take to have it. And then now, this is the key. This is where it's very important to relate powerfully to your word, to be somebody who, when they speak something, that is going to happen. So you say you're going to do something, and you know that it will be done. Not just that you'll do it, but you know that you can trust yourself to have
Mm.
that done. And and that, I think that started for me when I was in college. I practiced 6 days a week for
Mhm.
4 hours daily, starting at 7 a.m. My classes started at 11. So I would wake up quarter to six, which was very early for me as a college student,
Yeah.
and go grab a coffee and go and practice for 4 hours. And I did that 6 days a week. And I didn't see a lot of friends at that time, but that worked. And also inside of that practice, like I said, I was being who I wanted to be. One, being somebody who honors their word to
Mhm.
themselves, treats
Mhm.
themselves with the same respect that they might treat their loved ones, right? You
Mhm.
know, Don, you said, "Hey, let's do this call at 11:15," and I said, "Okay, I'll be there at 11:15." And I'm here because I respect you, and you're here because you respect me, right?
Yeah.
But like a lot of times we don't turn that around on ourselves. We don't,
No, we
we don't,
don't.
right? And
No,
so
yeah,
what, what if,
it's a big thing. I think what I was gonna say when as you were talking, I'm like, oh, this is huge in self-trust. Like, because if you can't trust, Jeff Goins was talking about it. He's a writer. He wrote a great book called Real Artists Don't Starve. It's a wonderful book. And but he talks about that self-trust, like living into the person you want. Like, I want to be a writer. Okay, then wake up every day and write your book, write your dream book. What if nobody reads it? What if this, people future trip so hard on, like, what if this doesn't pay off in the end? I'm like, the gift is in the present moment of you actually doing the art, right? It's in the creation of the art, or the playing of the music. I am relating to my writing because of practicing guitar.
hmm,
Like, just because for those of you who don't know, I said I would do one song a month, and I would just relearn some basic chords purely for my own joy. And what it's reminding me is that showing up for myself, because I said I would. 10 minutes a day is what I said I would do. And now it's extending to 30 minutes. But 10 minutes was my base. And I guess, for writing, it's longer because that's more where my craft is. But when I don't show up for me, and you can tell the audience, I mean, I know my experience. When I don't show up for me and I start like looking at the calendar and I go, oh yeah, I said I was going to do that. Like, and I'll do it for everybody else, right? I'll meet all my deadlines for others. That's why I think it's really good to do things with coaches, because you will have accountability that's gentle. But when I don't have all that and I don't show up for myself, I start to feel pretty icky. Like, I start to think life isn't quite in alignment. And then when I do start showing up for myself, other areas of my life feel better.
isn't
Can you
that weird?
talk into that? Like, when you're doing things for you, like when you were in college, first of all, let's back up for just a second. What got you up? Like, what was the vision? Because that's a very unique situation. Like, what vision did you have for yourself that managed you that you woke up that early for you in college?
Yeah, thank you. I'll say at that point, um, the vision was somewhat inauthentic. I'll admit, like it was that I started to realize that um in a professional atmosphere, I would be in competition with the other my fellow students. Not only that, but eventually with my professors, with the people who have the gigs that I want. And that's another mindset issue, is the competition. Now I've shifted my perspective. I don't really see it as competition. I see it as environment. That's the environment, right? um
Right.
and but at that time I was like, well, this is what it takes, and if I don't do it, I don't get to have it. And so at
Right.
that time it was just like, well, um I'm going to do this because I want to be somebody who can say they'll do something and they can do it. And so part of it was kind of just like, well, I'll show you. And then the other part of it was like, be really great. And I'll say for the first 3 months or so of that, I didn't feel any different. I just felt tired.
Yeah.
It wasn't showing up. Nothing was showing up. And it was really weird. I'd say like around 6 months in, I was practicing, I was playing, I was working on some of my repertoire, and I was like I had to do a double take. I was like, holy cow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I sound great. And and through that whole time, I was just kind of in this grind mode, and I didn't really give myself I didn't take time to acknowledge myself for what I was doing. But when I did, I was like, wow, I sound great. I feel really great. Yeah, so practice has become a part of my life where it's my meditation. It's like my writing practice, like you might have,
Yeah,
and it's
totally.
and you were saying earlier, like when you don't do it, especially if you don't do it for a few days, you look at the calendar, you're like, I feel icky. I don't feel like myself. When I practice, I feel like me. And when I
Yeah,
don't practice, I can feel it. I can feel that I don't feel like me. I don't feel centered. And
yeah.
I can see, the days when I'm really like feeling low power. And you were saying before about somebody saying that being the person who is a writer, right? So being a writer,
Mhm.
you want to be a writer,
Right,
be a writer, right?
right.
And I know that that's so, it feels so simple to say that,
Mhm.
but kind of taking a beat back to what we were talking about, where like, how did I get those gigs? It's like,
Mhm.
well, those are the gigs I got, right? And I want to say that I didn't get more gigs than I got. You know what I mean? I got those 2 gigs. I got a number of other gigs too, but those, let's say, are the notable ones. I got those 2, but like I didn't get a gig with Radiohead or Coldplay. You know what I mean? Or like name a band, right? Wilco. I didn't get gigs with these bands. I got gigs with those 2 bands, and it's because I created myself in such a way that I was being the person that gets that call,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yes,
And
for
I
sure.
think, and like you were saying, oh gosh, I don't know if I can generate it now, but you were
Was it
saying
the
like,
opportunity? It's better be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than it is to have an opportunity and not be prepared.
exactly,
I've had to
because
memorize that for a long time.
no, that's really good, because that opportunity comes and you got to be prepared for it, or
Mhm,
else you're waiting for that next
mhm.
opportunity. And if you're not prepared for that one, you're waiting for the next opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think with writers, and I believe it's the same for, I'm sure it is. I only say this because I will be walking my dog and I'll be thinking, ooh, I want to go practice again. I want to play that song. So I also think that way about writing. I'll think, ooh, I really want to attack that or get to that chapter because I know what's going to happen. Uh, and then when so what's interesting is I find though that people over 40, I mostly work with men and women over 40 who are heart-centered and really feeling the anxiety of this idea called capacity or overwhelm or I don't have the time. And what I try to get through to them, as you know, is that when you work with a coach, especially create when it comes to creativity, which I know is not yet emphasized in the magnitude of importance that it actually exists in. I mean, creativity like saves lives, you know. And
Everything.
when we're not living into a calling, a creative calling, we can feel half dead walking around. And right now is, I think, a best time in all of human history, not only to write books and blogs and social media, but to write songs and to be practicing on whatever your instrument is, because A, you probably have the extra time, but also when you hire a coach or when you're working with someone, there's this idea, this is what I'm getting at, that we're supposed to do everything alone. There's this like misnomer that somehow you're supposed to practice by yourself on your own, become great and perfect, and then just jump out of the closet or the back room and go, ta-da, here I am. Just like a writer's supposed to write a great novel, a great book, and then without any help, without anybody around them, and then come out. When the truth is that we have coaches, we have peers, we have groups, we need that feedback loop. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've seen some of maybe your clients or yourself shift? And you even said one of it was because you were in like this silent competition with the people you were showing up around. I think writers, when they get into groups, also have, a healthy silent competition, or at the very least, they feel energized because 9 times out of 10, as long as you're practicing, whether it's writing or an instrument, 9 times out of 10, you show up and you'll hear someone say, awesome, keep going. keep practicing. Whereas by yourself, you hear you suck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that whether it's with a coach or with your peers, having that perspective that is not right here, I think is really
Mhm.
important. They say you can't see the back of your own head. You know, it's it's and it's really funny because we think that we know ourselves so well, but we only know ourselves to the capacity to which we can know ourselves. Like I
Mm,
said, you can't see the back of your own head, and that I think is one of the main of benefits of having a coach, um, because coaches are trained to recognize what is going on for you that you're not recognizing. So
yeah.
often it's not, like for example with music, people say, "Oh yeah, you just got to practice. You just got to go practice that. So go practice it." And it's like, okay, but between that moment and the practice, which might never happen,
Yeah.
what shows up for you, right? What shows up for you such that it keeps you from practicing? It's like,
Mhm.
maybe it's like, you just feel like what's the word, resigned already. You're like, well,
Mm,
I'm never going
right.
to get there, or yeah, I'm kind of tired, I guess maybe I'll take a nap first. And really those are excuses that we make. Those are little, that's our ego trying to protect itself in some way,
Mhm.
because our ego is scared that we'll go and do this thing and not be good at it, and then that's going to be the end of the world for the ego, right? And so I think that one of the core roles of a coach, in addition to teaching and being encouraging and being a nurturing environment, is creating a nurturing environment. Is one is to help identify what those things are that are lurking in your blind spot.
Ooh, I
Um,
love that. What's lurking in your blind spot? Absolutely.
yeah, because that's what's going on. Is there's something at play and you don't recognize it? Because if you recognized it, you would have dealt with it and you would already be where you want to be, right?
Yeah, totally.
And a
Totally.
lot of times, like we think of it as like, oh well, I'm just not cut out to be at that level of excellence. and
Mhm.
then and that's the story we run with, because that frames us
Mhm.
as victims in this
Mhm.
narrative that we're creating. You go, well, the victim has this victim role and the hero gets
Mhm.
to go and do that thing. But it's like,
Yeah.
you know you create your reality with your words. You're creating your own story. Why the heck are you casting yourself as the victim and not casting yourself as the hero? Why
Yeah.
don't you cast yourself as the protagonist? Like, this is all made up.
Love
We're
that.
literally making this up. Everybody's making this up as we go. Like, make it up in
Totally.
a way that's empowering. So anyway,
And I think
that's kind of my job as a coach, I feel like.
fantastic. I think and there's so much room now that we know. Like there's an audience for everyone. There is an audience for everyone. There's billions of people. There's more than enough people. I think sometimes we're more afraid of success because if we actually do what we love to do, that the odds of someone reading it or hearing it or seeing it is high now. So
Vulnerable.
sometimes that's very vulnerable. Um, when you what is it so I think that this word overwhelm, that was my story. That's my story. I'm overwhelmed. Now that I know that it's my story, I've been very conscious of like, really, is that true? Like, is that really true? Or are you thinking about things? My coach was saying how overwhelm just means you're not being present. That's it. You're thinking about the past, you're thinking about the future, you're not present. So what is it that you just have to do right now? Most of the time what you need to be doing. But I love this idea of getting up a little earlier to practice. So I've been trying to convince myself and others to do this since I'm not consistent in my mornings either. Many people know this. I will be consistent in my day. Like I'll make time for it morning, lunch, or evening. And if it's not done sooner, it's harder to do later.
Mm.
How do you help people get better at keeping their word to themselves? Is there,
Mm.
I mean, I know that's putting you on the spot. It's a hard question, but like, what comes to mind when I ask you that?
Um, well, what comes to mind is, again, keeping your word is not the hard part. If I said I'm going to go have a bowl of ice cream right after this interview, I would go have a bowl of ice cream because that's easy and delicious, right?
Good point.
But it's not, it's whatever it is that we're keeping our word, whatever the word that we're creating, it's the discomfort that shows up for us in creating that word, right? So let's say I am I'm going to cold call a record executive when I'm done. Let's say I create that for myself, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's all sorts of confronting for me. Well, first of all, what am I going to talk to them about? Like, what? I don't even have a project, So there's all sorts of stuff, right? But it's whatever's coming up for us that's uncomfortable. that
Mm.
is that is what makes it difficult to, and sometimes it's a physical discomfort, like I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. You go, okay, I set my alarm, there's 6 a.m. 6 a.m. rolls around and you're like, oh, but I'm so comfortable here.
Cozy, yeah.
I'm cozy, it's warm here and it's cold outside of the bed, so I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
maybe just 15 more minutes, I'll just, turn the alarm off, I'm just going to snooze.
Totally.
Right. So there's so and we allow ourselves that, and I think, I don't think there's anything wrong with not keeping your word. That is one way to relate to your word. There's nothing wrong. There's
Mm.
there's so many ways that you could be. I mean, as many people as there are, 8 billion people or so, whatever.
Something like
There's
that,
probably
yeah.
there's probably 8 billion and one different ways to be, right? I mean, you could be any way that you want to be, and it's totally valid. But there is, if there's something that you want in your life, then it's going to take actions that are in alignment with that outcome.
Good point.
And you either do them or you don't. And it's up
Mhm.
to you. And it's complete, and there's nothing wrong with not having that. But like we're all going to end up in the ground someday.
Yeah.
It's like we've got this shot at it, and it's this big game. If you want it to be a game, I want to call it a game. This
I
life,
like
I want to call.
gamifying. I love
Yeah,
gamifying.
I want to. It's a game, and I'm out to get the high score. It's
Yeah,
just like, why not?
totally.
Why not? I've got a pocket full of quarters, and I'm just playing. And so it's like, it's there's you can look at it that way. You can look at it any other way. But if the ending is the same, the game ends the same way for all of us. Why not make it one that's
I
that you.
love this. I love this. It lightens it up. I love how one of the things I love about William, I want to tell everybody, and he and I have talked on the phone, and he, as colleagues to colleagues, and also asking advice. One of the things I think that you do excellently is you remove the anxiety from this big thing that we're putting ourselves, like, oh gosh, I just need to do this. Like, fuck, I'm tired of this shit. I want to make, people get really frustrated with themselves. I think one of the something you offer as a coach that's great is you take out the anxiety and you make it fun. You have a way to saying, okay, hey, listen, there's not even anything wrong with you not keeping your word. Like, okay, but is that in alignment with where you want to go? Like, is how do we create alignment? And I think the bottom line is, so we feel better. So we feel better, the healing power of words, right? The words that we use within us and the stories we tell ourselves. I think that people really underestimate, silly as it sounds, that it really is okay to feel better. Like, we're so used to being told that we've got to put so much on our plate, and it's almost like if you're not worried, scared, overworked, and stressed, you're not part of the crew, the in crew.
Right.
But if you were to find a way to add in 15, 20 minutes a day, would you say that 20 minutes a day would be enough to change someone's life in their either playing their instrument? I know in writing it's true, but would you say with an instrument, 20 minutes a day would change someone's life?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, let's add that up. I mean, that's two and a third hours a week, right? So that would be what, eight, nine and a third hours a month.
You're
I
way
mean,
better
you
at
it
mathematics.
just
That's
it adds
great.
up.
It's almost 10 hours a month.
Yeah,
That, oh my gosh, there you are, and all of a sudden you've got that much more under your belt,
absolutely.
and you
Yeah.
feel better. And creativity in life is supposed to feel
I'll,
good.
I'll say this, the caveat though. I think 20 minutes a day, being present to it.
Yeah.
Don't. Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do or tell anybody what to do, but I would invite you to consider that you're not doing it for an outcome. You're doing
Mm,
it to experience yourself powerfully. You're doing
that's
it to
awesome.
experience yourself as a musician. And so spending 20 minutes a day just being present to the instrument is going to bring you, it's going to bring you, well, I can't even tell you because I don't know what it's going to bring you, but you're going to find something for yourself. You're going to know yourself better. You're going to get to know that instrument, and it's going to create a way of being that you have never had before. And you
Yes,
may like it, you may hate it, but if
yes.
you hate it, you know you hate it, and you can go do something else. You can go skydiving or knitting or
I
whatever.
love it. A way of being that you haven't had before just by being present. That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's
it's
genius. That's a great way to put it.
thank you.
We're already at time and you have a great free gift for us. So
I
let us know about
do.
that.
I do. So I created a little 3-day mini course. It's 3 videos about 5 minutes long each ish, and an assignment to go with it.
Okay.
And the intention of that video is to give you some of the tools that we talked about in this interview, but some of the tools that I use with my clients in creating a future for yourself using your word, an ideal future, a fantasy future, a real juicy, hot future, right? And then creating actions that are in alignment with that, and then creating accountability for yourself in making a habit out of that. And so
Excellent.
these are kind of the tools that are at the core of the work that I do with my clients. Of course, when we're working, really deep, we get to uncover a lot of the trauma and the uncomfortable,
Yeah.
vulnerable bits in conversation. But that's so yes, I have that, and I believe that link will be
Yeah,
available
you'll
with
have
the.
that. Everything will be on this page. You'll get to know all about William, the free gift, and everything so that you can reach him, contact him, and move further in your life if you are working with music. And even if you're a writer, like, we all have different offshoots of things we want to do. Don't give up on music. Music is a wonderful healing modality, and you just never know where it's going to lead you. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for being here, William.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is such a wonderful conversation.
A great conversation. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep healing with those words. You heal a lot of minds, which is great because our minds are full of words. Have a wonderful time in Los Angeles. I know it's hot there too, I think.
It's nice and toasty here. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Talk soon.
Okay.
Bye, Don.
Thanks. Bye.